All right, guys, we are live for our seven-figure MSP Lunch and Learn. So it is lunchtime in the United States right now. Well, at least in my time zone. I got my good buddy Brian Horning with me here today. Hey, what's up, Brian?
What's up, Chris? Thanks for having me on, bud.
Yeah, so this is a first kind of thing we're doing a little bit different. We haven't done these lunch and learn deals, and I just kind of wanted to see how it would go and try something a little bit different. And hopefully, my goal is to do this every Wednesday from here on out. Kind of to infinity and beyond, and we'll see where it goes. But Brian, really quick, while we're here, can you do a little quick intro on yourself and your company?
Yeah, sure. I'm Brian Horning. If you don't know me, I'm CEO of Exact IT Solutions and Exact Cybersecurity. I've been around since 2004. Been hanging out with Chris for
a little bit now.
3 or 4 years now.
A little bit now.
But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy what I'm doing. And just trying to get better every day. That's why I'm here in seven figure, and whatever we can do to stay ahead of the curve, get the edge, and keep that mindset tight is where I want to be.
It's really important. And Brian and I work a lot on business growth and sales growth and all these other things. But one of the things that has come to me in the last few weeks here has been this cybersecurity is a big deal right now. You mentioned that your company's moved kind of from Exact IT Solutions to Exact Cybersecurity, and we're focusing on all that now. And I was talking to a couple of buddies of mine, Art Gross from Breach Secure Now and in Skyber, and his partner at Willow Risk, which is Tom Wierzbowski. And we were just kind of going through this, and I want to kind of lay the groundwork for what I think is a concerning situation for the MSP world. And you guys that are watching this with us both live and on the recording, feel free to chime in. We can maybe bring some comments on live and talk about it. But one of the things that we've seen recently, and I'll kind of want to, and for those of you guys that don't know me or don't know my history, I owned an MSP in Wisconsin and Milwaukee from 2005 to 2015, and I sold that MSP. So I was a little bit before cybersecurity time. We obviously were seeing some of the issues that we see now, which are, I saw like CryptoLocker was a thing that happened back then. The Target breach happened back then. So it was already starting to come. But where we sit now, we're starting to see, obviously, breaches. And Brian, feel free to chime in on any of this that you want to. But we're seeing breaches increase, compromises, active hacks, business email compromises. All those things are massively increasing. While at the same time, I don't know so much that we've seen the MSP response landscape change a lot. And where I'm going with this, and this is what I really want to discuss with you, Brian, today on today's message and today's discussion, is how should MSPs be remediating virus scenarios, ransomware scenarios, hack scenarios? Because the typical way, correct me if I'm wrong, wipe and reload has been the typical way a lot, right? Very few MSPs will pick the actual PC up or the hard drives up because the clients don't typically want to pay for different hardware or do different. So what's your thoughts on that? And then anybody that's watching, feel free to comment. I'm watching the comments. We'll bring that up on screen if we have anything that you guys want to talk about. But what's your thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, first things first. You got to evaluate your client and whether they have cyber insurance or not, because that's going to dictate your decision making. Your client has cyber insurance as the MSP. Whether you do security or not for that company, you have to take a back seat until you're given the green light by whoever is in charge. And it could be cyber insurance, it could be the FBI, it could be local law enforcement, but you typically have to wait until you get the green light in order to start any kind of recovery process.
Now, you said something there that was actually interesting, and I want you guys that are watching this to think about this, because Brian said if you have cyber insurance, but what happens if it's a regulated industry? What happens if it's medical? What happens if it's financial? What happens if it's – because I think at that point, you still can't. You got to pause. Am I right on that?
Well, man, I think if you're in a regulated industry and your client is running without cyber insurance, you're probably breaking, the regulations or the laws. B, I just kind of look at regulated industries is the ones who would have cyber insurance. It's the ones that are not
Not all of
regulated.
them do, though. We know that. You see those small companies out there; they don't have that a lot.
Right, and I'm going to mention something in a couple of minutes here that we'll add to that, but it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't have cyber insurance, you as the MSP are really going to be the one in charge, because your client's going to call you. They're not going to have anyone else to call, so they're going to call you. So at this point, you need to start making the right decisions. And unfortunately, the lay of the land that I see right now is that companies are seeking out IT companies, MSPs, whatever you want to call them, that will, like, we've seen this where they're looking for MSPs that'll help them sweep this under the rug. So nobody finds out. And hopefully we're not talking to too many of those in your group, that would be unethical enough to do that. There is a standard of ethics. I don't think it'll be too long before we are a regulated industry, but right now we're not.
I agree with that.
And that's the big thing. I mean, we're in the beginning stages of the ramifications of not being regulated and having this type of responsibility on our shoulders. And that's where this is going. I mean, you as an MSP, you have to understand that you're, number one, if you're not doing, I think you agree with me on this. If you're an MSP who has no interest in doing cybersecurity, just be upfront about it. It's okay to be the infrastructure company and not, don't pretend you're taking care of security, and don't be afraid to have the conversation.
But you have to have that. I think in that scenario, you have to have the cybersecurity conversation, because, and here's something else that we want to think about. If you're not having, I agree with Brian. It's totally fine if you don't want to do cybersecurity, but you better establish, not only verbally, in meetings, in writing, in your agreements, in your MSAs. You have to have an MSA now, and you have to state, client, it is your responsibility to do this. Am I off on any of that?
No. And quite frankly, if you're a good MSP and your business model is we're not going to touch security, go find somebody you can partner with that's going to work with you and not try to take your MSP business. Because what's going to happen is your client's going to go find their own security provider, and they probably have an MSP behind them in some way, shape, or form. And they're just going to sit there in a catbird seat and point out all the things you're doing poorly.
And they're going to use that against you.
They're going to take that business.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a business model that we implement in our company. I mean, we don't need to do the MSP work, because we know if we go in and do the security work, more than likely they're going to be like, hey, can we hire you guys to do the IT stuff too?
Yep.
So I would say, partner up with somebody if you're not going to touch it. And then, I know we love as IT people to be, that bravado, we can fix everything. And that mentality definitely needs to change. I've talked to too many incident responders where the MSP did the wrong thing and just made the whole entire situation worse. And you have to really understand incident response and be qualified to do incident response and forensic investigations. And if you don't have training and qualifications in that, you have to understand that you're in over your head. And like Chris said, if you think it's just, wipe and reload, when you wipe, you could be opening yourself up to a lot of, liability, because you're getting rid of evidence. And what we talk about on our podcast a lot, Chris, that I have.
What's your podcast really great?
It's Security Squawk. Reg Andre and Randy O'Hara and Randy Bryan, Ryan O'Hara, Randy Bryan, too many R's. We all do a podcast, and we talk about it all the time about how, not only do you have to know this stuff, but you can't be the one who's causing the problem, because we're seeing too many of these incidents turn into lawsuits months and months down the road. Once the people who are affected by breaches really get wind of how they were affected, like my credit card got stolen 2 years ago on a website from a local, hoagie franchise in the area. And I'm today getting letters and emails from lawyers saying, hey, join this class action lawsuit because you were one of the ones affected. Like,
Yeah.
this is 2.5 years down the road. And these are the things that, are not going to be in the moment types of things. They're going to be down the road, 6 months, 2 years, where a lawyer comes along and says, hey, we want this. And if you can't produce it, it's kind of almost like admitting guilt. I mean, because they're going to be like, well, you didn't have the telemetry. You didn't have the ability to know this. So we have to assume it wasn't being done.
And I think, and I want everybody that's watching this to think about it this way. If we walked into a stabbing scene, would we immediately start thinking, oh, how can I help the end user wipe it down? Like, no, the first thing would be, I'm going to call the cops. I want to call 911. I'm going to do all this. It's almost, now it seems a little extreme, but it's almost to that level but it's so much easier to let the client dictate the path in this because they're like, oh my God, I need this up immediately. And what have we in the MSP industry always done? We've always come on top of things. I got you. I'll fix it. Yes. I'm here. But now we're in this scenario. And as Brian mentioned, if they have cyber insurance at all, it has to be incident response first. We've seen this in our 7-figure MSP Elite program. Brian, I know you've experienced this with many of our other members already, to where we are seeing, I got a business email compromise situation here. We go immediately to incident response. It is not react to the client's needs. And that's a big, big deal for today's world.
Yeah, it's a big deal because the mindset of the typical IT person is not security. It's not, I look at security and IT as two very different functions, right? I've used IT as your job is to make things go, right? The job of a security professional is to make sure things are done correctly and done right, and there's order and there's process, which those two things are two different personality styles. So you have to have the awareness to know that if you're a really good IT guy, you might not be cut out for security just because of the way that your brain thinks and the way that you just want to react to things. And that's the biggest mistake I think I see a lot of guys make, is they just want to jump in and help. And it's, no good deed goes unpunished. I say that all the time, right? You're just going in there to help, right? But you don't realize in that process, you're really creating a lot of damage for, your client.
Well, and very few, I think you can, actually, I'll get your opinion on this, but in my experience, very few MSPs are bad people. They want to help. They're actually good techs, but like you said, it's a totally different thing from being a good tech to being really security focused. And that so much of that comes from the process you have in your MSP, not letting the client, and I say this a lot, not letting the client dictate the path of support, because forever, and what I want you guys also to know, thinking of the history of your relationship with all of your clients, they've always, for the most part, like 99% of the time, dictated the path, because the MSP had no real reason to be like, no, we won't do this because it's all cost conscious. Now we have to stop. It's almost like that stop, drop, roll thing when you're on fire. Like, you got to stop a second, think about the scenario, think about their business and what things might be at stake. So one of the things that we teach in our coaching program is every single relationship starts with a cybersecurity risk assessment. Do you agree that that's the right path?
100%. Yeah, that's the right path. And the other piece of it too is a lot of times when, in my experience, when clients are in these situations, the MSP is trying to get them out of that as cheaply as possible.
Yeah.
And there's nothing cheap about incident response. Like, if you don't have the balls to go to your client and say, you have to buy all new everything, all new firewalls, all new switches, all new servers, all new computers, all new laptops, you have to start over from scratch because we need to retain the old system. And if you don't have, the mental makeup to go to a client and say that, and you're just going to, fall to whatever they want, which is, hey, get us back up and running as quickly as possible, which means running on the same hardware that was breached. These are the things that I worry about when I look at the MSP landscape, and I go, how far do we have to go to protect these companies. And that's a big piece of it. A big piece of it is just, having a backbone and standing up to people who may have been pushing you around as a business owner for a very long time, because that's very common in this industry, in my opinion.
It's extremely common. I think, and you see it a little bit from my point of view, just because you're at our shows and we have, a couple hundred MSPs there and we're talking about this. I see it in mass to where I'm going to tell you 9 out of 10 MSPs that come into our interview room are not thinking of it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I know it too from just being shopped. We'll hear what other MSPs are offering or what they're doing, or when we take over from an old MSP, with how their service delivery was versus ours. And that can go for and against you. Typically, companies that are growing and forward thinking aren't thinking like, what I call the small-minded business owner, the small-minded MSP, right? So these are ways that you can figure out if you're really aligned with a company and they're aligned with you and where you're going. I mean, if you want to grow, the last thing you want to have is a bunch of small-minded clients that want to dictate service, want to tell you, want to call you on your cell phone as the business owner, and they can't handle calling somebody else in your company. I fought those battles for years until we got the right client base.
And that's got to be here. So much of that's got to be here on the CEO,
100%.
Right?
Yeah. You got to get over the fact that the revenue's not worth it. They might be a great client. They might be $5,000 a month in revenue, but if the owner prefers to call your cell phone for support versus your help desk number,
they're not a good fit.
They're not a good fit. Exactly.
So you were in the audience a couple weeks ago when we had Chris Krebs at our Charlotte event, and Chris mentioned a couple. And Chris was, I wasn't sure. I'd never met with him prior to literally the day that we did our interview, but he mentioned a couple things live there with us, and I want all of you that are watching this to understand how real this is. And Chris Krebs was basically the head of cybersecurity for the United States for a few years. And he's still very connected in Washington. And I now text back and forth with him. It's pretty cool. But he mentioned everyone in MSP landscape has to prepare for a bad day. And he also said, I believe every business in the United States, every other first world country should without question have an MSP that they partner with. He did say that. But he also said, you have to be in a place now where your clients and you are informing your clients that it's not about preventing hacks anymore. It's about, and yes, we're still going to do that, but they're all getting hacked. You have to now limit the blast radius. These were his terms. You have to limit the blast radius. You have to do what you can to control, recover, and do your best to get their insurance claim paid out. I'd like your feedback on that, because we haven't talked about that since we met him.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I guess the way I look at that is, God, I mean, how do you know you're really doing a good job with that? How do you know that you're covering the blast radius? And how I look at that is, it's not about what you do as the MSP. It's how much does your client understand? Like,
man, this is so right on. You hit that right there. That's so right.
It's how much is it their responsibility? I think that's the biggest thing, that if you were to ask our clients what they've gone through in probably the last year or two, and mainly because we got better at understanding like what a tabletop exercise should really look like. And one tip I'll give everyone today is, when we first started doing tabletop exercises, we just kind of built policies and kind of went through the policies and kind of said, hey, does this make sense? Does that make sense? Talk to different department heads, things like that. Now we're literally taking them through actual scenarios where I just play kind of like the facilitator role. And I just say, okay, we just got a phone call from an employee who just said, they can't access files on the drive. And that happened at 8:05 a.m. And now it's 8:10 and we just got 2 more phone calls. And I'm taking the business owner through an entire scenario rollout, all the way through of, to when we decide to recover and when recovery looks like. And we're laying out the timeline for them, because we're bringing it when we're making it real for them. So your job is to make this as real as possible for your clients so they understand it. Because a lot of times, even though they're doing things and you're doing things, it's still a box checking exercise where we're at with a lot of this stuff. And even though we're saying we're doing incident response planning on our cyber insurance application, are we really? Like, what does that look like? Does your client understand what they're going to have to go through when they get ransomware? Are they ready to pull out pen and paper? Who are they calling? Like, these are the things that they need to start understanding, so they understand, like, you know what, my plan's not as tight as it should be.
Well, and so many of those business owners are like, we're too small to get hacked, or the hackers don't have anything that we want. So making sure that they understand the breadth and the depth of it all.
Yeah, one of the most effective questions you can ask your clients to see if they get it or not is, when you get ransomware, who are you calling? Because the wrong answer is they're calling you. That's the wrong answer. Because you can be part of the people that they're calling, but if their answer is I'm calling you, meaning my IT provider, my MSP, that's the wrong answer. They should know exactly, you might get called at a certain point, but you shouldn't be the first person they're calling. And what I hear when somebody says that to me is, I'm putting this whole entire responsibility on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and the liability for the most part, right? They're
blaming the whole point of
it's your responsibility as an MSP. So who should, in your, like, from your standpoint, because I know that we have a lot of people watching right now, who should they call? What should be their process? I want to hear this from the horse's mouth here.
Obviously depends on whether you have cyber insurance or not. But if you have cyber insurance, your first phone call should be to your claims line on your cyber insurance policy. That's your first call. If you don't have cyber insurance, if your client doesn't have cyber insurance, this should be a well thought out discussion that you have with your client, saying, okay, if your first phone call when you get ransomware is going to be to our company, then you should have a process behind that where you're going through what that looks like. And here's what our team's going to do when you make that phone call. So they fully understand it. They're almost, what I see most business owners doing today is I see them taking the ransomware problem and just putting it on the MSP shoulders. Like, if I ever get ransomware, I'm calling Joe. And it's like, well, okay, what happens when you call Joe? What is Joe going to do? What happens if it happens at 2:30 on a Saturday?
Yeah. And one thing I want everybody to understand too, you have to have these conversations ahead of time. Again, let's go back to what Chris Krebs said. You have to prepare for the bad day. What is the bad day going to look like? They have to understand this, because the other factor that I want.
Well, he used a great term, which is, you got to reduce the blast radius. Yep. Right. That's how you should look at this. Like, the bomb's going to go off, but how bad is it going to be, and who's going to get hit, and how far away? And, like, as an MSP, you should be trying to reduce that blast radius as much as possible.
So, and when Brian says reduce the blast radius, your first level of blast radius reduction is you have to stop this before even this starts by having the cybersecurity conversation, making sure they understand the risk. What does your agreement with the client look like? What does your terms of service look like? What does your liability limitation look like? When I say liability limitation, one of the big factors that I like to use is, I use my iPhone as an example. Apple has a terms of service, just like Google does, or Android does, or Samsung does, et cetera, that this phone could explode in my hand. And they have a limitation, the amount of money that they can actually be held responsible for, I believe with Apple, is limited to $100 US. So this phone could take my arm off due to a defect, and their limitation is $100. So what does your agreement say when you get breached? Here's how we're going to handle it. Here's how we're going to remediate it. Here's what our incident response scenario is like. Now let's rewind a second, because how many of you have actually talked with your clients and say, when you get breached, ransomed, hacked, whatever you want to call it, that when word has to be in the discussion. It has to be in the vocabulary. It's not if. And it's, Brian, I was at the MSP Summit in Florida a couple of weeks ago, did a discussion in front of about 100. And I said, let's raise hands. How many in here can prevent all hacks? The room laughed. What does the end user think?
They think you can protect them from anything, and when
Exactly.
something does happen, you're going to come to the rescue.
Yep.
And that's 100% the myth we have to dispel. And the other thing that I see in the marketplace that is concerning for me with this industry is that you guys can and should charge more for this stuff. Like, it doesn't have to be done under your MSP agreement. And I think I see too many MSPs trying to shoulder this on their current agreement or what they're currently charging. And we all need as an industry to do a better job of defining what our service levels are and making sure that our clients are crystal clear that you have a managed service offering that's designed to make your network run. The security offering is something completely separate, and that's how you make money on this stuff. So when you're doing incident response planning and tabletops, you're charging for those services. That's not included with your typical managed services. So that's a huge mistake I see guys making all the time, is they're trying to fit all this stuff in the same box under the same.
And because of the lack of, so I want you guys, I'm going to expand on this a little bit for everybody watching this, and Brian's spot on with this, but it starts with making sure your client is prepared. You've had the discussions. They have to understand that there is segregation. That means you have a discussion, you do a cybersecurity risk assessment. Every one of your clients you have to have a cybersecurity risk assessment. You have to have a discussion with them about, you're going to get hacked. What's our plan? How are we going to limit the blast radius? Do you have cybersecurity insurance? All these things have to be discussed ahead of time, because I'm going to tell you, you try having that discussion with them afterwards, it's not going to be fun, because they are going to blame you exclusively. Yep. Brian, I think you were there. You and I haven't talked about this. Have you had any incidents, or I could talk about Logan's incident that is a very specific one that we know about?
No, we're batting 1,000. Thank God.
That's good. So, and we had guys, you're batting 1,000, which is great, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're counting your blessings and saying, I'm doing everything I can to make sure I keep batting 1,000, but I'm not going to forever.
Yeah. I mean, look, we do the best we can. We put best in class tools out there.
Yeah.
We can't always get clients to buy them. And there's certain tools out there, that I'm not willing to just throw into the stack and hope we can increase them later. Like, they have to agree. And some of the tools are, what I would call, invasive. They're going to know that those tools are there, like a zero trust type tool or something like that. So there has to be an education process and rolling those out, and you have to do it the right way. So, that's the reality of it. Like, we're rolling out as much as we can, the best we can, but
yeah.
You can't.
So let me talk about so for everybody watching this, we had one of our clients, Brian knows him, his name's Logan. He had a client that he had the cybersecurity discussion with and said, hey, we want to put cybersecurity in for you, but it's going to cost more money. They said, nope, we don't have it in the budget. He said, okay, so here's what's going to happen. When you get hacked, here's how we're going to handle it. All the things we're kind of talking about here. And that drawing the line in the sand was a critical point, because 2 months later, they did get a business email compromise where they paid out a wire transfer to Russia. And they ended up, long story short, trying to blame Logan. He had done all his steps. The insurance company then also tried to blame Logan. He had done all his steps. And they basically said, okay, you're in the clear. Good job. Properly done. Good job. And they came back and they did end up paying the claim. They did a full forensics. They did a full crime scene investigation. They found that the client had not educated, had not protected, had not done their due diligence, and was negligent. And they only paid 10% of the claim. So the client was not only responsible for the $135,000, they paid $13,500 of the claim. But they also had to be responsible for the forensics and the breach coach and all this other stuff that happened along with the recovery fee. So what you guys, I want you to think about, that's a real life scenario that really happened. What I want you guys to think about is, what would happen if one of your clients had that issue? Secondarily, because going to happen based on your agreement and how they expect you to remediate it and who's going to pay. Because that's what Brian was talking about. This is kind of where I was coming with this whole thing. Brian talking about you guys taking all of it and just throwing it on your back, because we know the clients want it fixed now and they want you working on it until it's resolved.
Yeah. To add to that, you just have to also factor in, like in Logan's case, he seemed to have his stuff together. Probably didn't cost him a fortune, but he still had to put time and money and effort into producing the evidence that he was doing things the right way.
I do believe he billed for all that, for the record.
Right. So that's the thing you need to keep in mind, is like, he did the smart thing. He billed for it. Right. Just because we're in this position, we can get sued if a client gets hacked. Like the insurance company, if they have cyber insurance, can look, well, who's their MSP? Who's, well, let's go after them too. And you're just brought into it because they're just fishing to see who they can get to help pay the bill. Yep. And you have to be prepared for this. You have to be prepared that you're going to, get drug into lawsuits, which is going to cost you time and money. So charge accordingly for your services. And when people ask why, these are the reasons you can give them. Well, like if you have a breach, I have to have a team of people put together a team of people that can help us put together evidence to prove that we were doing everything we could to protect you. And that's a thing. I mean, that's something you're going to have to spend money on and do. And these are the reasons why you can command north of $300 a user, because of all these things and all this risk that you are taking on just by offering IT services.
I have, I'm glad you dropped the $300 per seat number in there. It's one of the things that I'm very adamant on this. And Brian, you see people come into our program that are like, nope, I can't do this. There's no way I can do this. But I'm going to tell you guys, if you properly assess, show the risk, and then also have the discussion with the client, hey, they don't have to upgrade, but this gives you a chance to give them the option to upgrade, put it on them. Cindy Phillips, our head sales coach, calls that the shared bond of competence. And I think it is a very great statement, because it's all about, hey, we're going to work on this together. We're not going to say that we're going to wipe our hands of it and you're screwed, but we're surely not going to put it all on our back just because we can't be afraid to talk to these end users. I think it's really important.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, that's the biggest thing I see a lot of times when companies switch to our company. It was that their MSP just wasn't communicating to them like we can come in. Like if I can come in and I can do a cyber risk assessment on your business and start having conversations with you, who I probably just met within the last 30 days. Yeah. And I'm giving you more information than your MSP has given you in the last 2 years. What do you think is going to happen there? Right. So, I mean, that's really how you're going to lose your clients. And we're really not in an economy. We're heading into an economy where you don't want to be losing clients. So, get the tools to do the cyber risk assessments, do them, understand where your clients are at, and use that as the conversation starter to get this happening. Don't be afraid to have these conversations, because it's going to put you out of business.
Yeah. So we got a question from the audience here. Do you guys push cyber insurance to customers? Do you push them to brokers to deal with it? So I'm going to go first on this, and then I want to get Brian's take on this too. So I personally don't believe an MSP should be in the business of selling cybersecurity insurance. It's not your jam. You're not prepared for it. You're not ready to deal with it. But what you should do is partner with, number one, at the very least, a local independent insurance agent that you can partner with and educate and have a relationship with. Because what's going to happen is, if you don't have some type of a relationship with them and start introducing them to this, they are going to get talked to by an agent, their broker, etc. And let's not forget, those people are salespeople. They're not educated. They're not good at this. They don't know what they're talking about. They're really, Brian, we've seen this. They're not up on it. They don't. And 9 times out of 10, they're telling your client, oh, you don't need this. You don't need this. You don't need this. And they're just trying to kind of sell a service. And you have to be really careful with this and not having some type of control of the situation. So my recommendation is, at the very least, partner with a local insurance agent. We're friends with the people over at Inskyber, which is backed by Willow Risk Management. I highly recommend those guys. Art Gross is a good dude. Tim Wersbowski is a good dude. That's what I recommend. Brian, I'll let you answer that as well.
Yeah, I just say the same exact thing you said. We don't push cyber insurance. You got to be licensed insurance, an insurance to sell it. And we don't partner with anyone, so we get a back end kickback. I like my clients to go out and kind of find their own thing. And if we can find, refer them to somebody who's a little bit more competitive, we'll do that. I don't like to be involved in the decision-making process of who they go with their cyber insurance. Couple reasons for that. The middle market companies, they usually already have a relationship, or it's being brought to them by maybe a parent company in those situations. So, as long we push them to have it, and we push them to have certain coverages that we will go through their policy with them and say, okay.
So do you actually help them fill out the application and go through?
We always fill out the application. Like, that's part of what we do with our security service. We are the ones who fill out the application for them, because that application, and I'll give everybody another tip. That's the easiest way to have a compliance conversation in the world.
Yeah.
What we do is we ask them to take a stab at it first, and then they send us their answers, and then I take that and file it away, and then I give them the correct answers, and then we can start having a conversation about where they think they are versus where they really are.
And part of the problem you guys got, not you, Brian, but everybody watching, is chances are your client thinks you are doing all of the stuff that's on it, because these apps have changed in the last year. Mm-hmm. They went from basic stuff like 1 to 2 pages, just saying, hey, how much, even if they had like, how much data do you have? We watched this like literally a year ago. We had some comparable ones from March to October. They completely changed from a 1 page to a 9 page. But now they're looking for all this in-depth. Are you doing MFA? Are you doing EDR? Are you doing zero trust? What is your password rotation policy or your password change policy? Like, all those things are happening now. So, hey, another reason to have the cyber, and maybe a good lead in to the cybersecurity discussion is, why don't we review your cybersecurity insurance policy, Mr. Client,
right,
if you're afraid to have it? My suggestion is just go in and do it, but that's hard for certain people.
Yeah, no, it's the easiest way to open up a conversation around cybersecurity, though.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree.
Especially if you weren't the one who filled out the form, get it from them.
Well, and here's another avenue.
You know what the biggest thing we got out of it? Like, before cyber insurance policies, we had trouble with clients telling us what their actual revenue was. When we get these in, the revenue's on there, and we know how much revenue they have. So I think I know probably 75-80% of our clients, we know what their revenue is, right? Yeah, so we can then, because it's different when you get it that way versus, hey, I'm trying to help you with IT budgeting, and give me, what's your revenue level? You think they're going to give you the high end, or are they going to give you the low end? They're going to give you the low end because they know you're trying to help them, with budgeting, and they want to give you as little budget as possible. So, with one client for sure, we got what they told us they were making versus what they actually put on the cyber insurance was a difference of about $2.5 million.
Yeah.
So they said they were a $7 million company. They were more like 9.5, almost 10. So, it makes a difference when you're looking at, planning and budgeting.
And I think that stuff. So I know we're going to have some people say, well, why do you need to know your client's revenue? Because you need to know what their IT budget looks like, because we're in a world now. Sorry, somebody just showed up at my house, so my dogs are barking. We're in a world now where you have to have these discussions with them. You have leverage to have these discussions, and you can use their revenue, their top line revenue, to say, this is what you should be budgeting. We're finally in. It's the best time ever to be in this industry because of things like that. It's a big deal. Okay, got another question here. Are you good on time? How are you doing on time?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, cool. Okay.
I'm good. Let's
So this is just from this person's is weird. They were given this name, Facebook user. That's an odd name to be born with, but he'll take it. What tools are you using to perform the cyber assessment, Brian? What are you guys using? If anything's proprietary, feel free to not mention it. But I'll say our group stuff as we go.
Yeah. So we use a bunch of different tools. We've kind of took the industry tools that are out there and obviously built our own internal processes and ways that we kind of extrapolate that information and put that into the report we ultimately give the clients. But the main tools that we use are rapid fire tools to do the network and security assessments. We're also using the information that we pull from Galactic Advisors with their Galactic Scan product. And then we're using ID Agent and Bullfish to do dark web scanning and phishing simulation. And that's really it, because the network detective gives us kind of the PII piece where we're looking for data on the network and things like that. What I can tell you is, and this is as a result of, sitting in calls with you guys at Seven Figure, I don't think a lot of companies are doing what I'm about to say, but our assessment process used to be kind of like get in there and get it done as quick as possible. Where now we're really asking the clients to let us run our tools for at least 30 days. That gives us enough information to where we can deliver a really effective assessment versus, over a 1 week period.
Just get in, get off, get out kind of thing. And
and it's hard now because like everybody's remote. So,
yeah,
it might, where we could just show up to one office and have somebody go around and run scans. We're now trying to coordinate schedules with people. So
very in depth and very thorough is where you're going with this, right?
Yeah. I mean, the more time you get, the better your assessment is going to be. I mean, that's just what we've learned over the years. So don't be afraid to change your processes internally to a more thorough, longer assessment. It gives you more time to do fish tests. Because maybe, the first batch that went out didn't make it through the spam filter or whatever, so you got to work with certain people in the organization to try to get those phishing emails through, things like that. Just a little bit more time makes them feel like you're actually taking the time to understand them. And then, that'll give you a more effective presentation when you're coming down.
Yeah, and for everybody else, I think it's really important. First of all, I don't care what tool you use, but you have to hit a couple of pieces here. First of all, your goal, you are there to discover risk. What do they have? Forget locking down the network for 3 weeks. Yes, that's important, but it's pretty easy to paint that picture. What things on their network might hackers want to get a hold of and potentially either used for ransom, we're going to release this a ransom, or just used to try and get into other areas. So you're there to try and find as much of that data and make sure that the decision makers see it. We have one of our members, and again, we don't care what tools you're using, but we have one of our members in our program. He actually takes a list of all the CEO's passwords and puts them in an envelope during their sales presentation and passes it as a confidential document to the CEO. And he's like, "What is this?" He's like, "Oh, this is all the passwords I found in your network for your eyes only." And you think about what that does. So our job now, we have to do cybersecurity risk assessments on everyone. Existing clients, I'd hit them first because that's your biggest point of liability. But then it's also taking that and using that information not to scare the daylights out of them. We don't want to be in this FUD world, fear, uncertainty, and doubt world. We don't want that, but it's to show them that the risk is real. And it's to show them you need this. Need is the first barrier to breaking down price objections. You have to get that decision maker to say, "Whoa, I need this." Because
business owners have a blind spot to this, and it's our job to reveal it to them. And that's the biggest thing in business. Like, that's why we do, when I mentioned the tabletops exercises the way that we do. Unfortunately, most of the time when we walk away from those, the executives are like, "Thanks for scaring the shit out of us." But the reality of it is I just made them realize, using a, kind of like a personal training kind of analogy, is like we just made them realize how out of shape they are.
Yeah.
Like they thought they were ready for a ransomware attack, but they're really not. And I can't tell a client that. I can't call them up and say, "Hey, Mr. Client, I know we're doing all these great things. You're not prepared for a ransomware attack, though." They're gonna be like, "What do you mean?" You have to show it to them. You have to take them through and show them exactly what this scenario looks like. Same thing. The next one we're going to do with the client we just did last week. We're going to do next quarter. We're going to do a business email compromise, and we're going to take them through that. And the same thing's going to happen. Oh shit, we didn't realize, this, that, or the other thing. And that's, I hate the term FUD because I think, again, going back to mindset, I think a lot of really good IT people are afraid to do some of the things that need to get done because they're afraid that their buddy's going to call them a fudder. And you can't care about that shit. Like your job is to reveal a blind spot to these executives. And if in that process they develop a sense of fear because they feel like they're going to lose something or they don't have it, that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, they should be scared, but I just get that objection a lot from people, and they use I'm not in here peddling, scare tactics. And it's not about that, guys. This is real stuff that you have to be prepared for. And if you want to get to a place where your clients, I don't care if you think you can't charge more money in your market, you can. Like, Brian, we've watched this in our program. Like you can charge more money. I don't care where in the world you are. You can charge more money than you're charging now by dramatic amounts.
Look, not everybody's going to buy $300 a user IT services, right? So like, that's the biggest thing. Like you can't expect a guy who you've been charging $40 a user a month to jump up to 300. Although we've seen it happen.
We've seen it. It's just really rare and it's hard and usually has to be chunked up.
But like, I look at it like this. I look at it like, you said it earlier where guys are like, "Oh, I'll never get that in my market." I look at it a totally different mindset. I'm not getting out of bed in the morning unless I'm getting that number.
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm working with less clients? Sure does. But I can tell you right now, I'm friends with 5 guys that own MSPs that are 3 or 4 times the size of mine. Their profit margins aren't where mine are at. I can tell you that right now. They're running maybe, 30-40% gross profit, which, when you pay all the bills, they're barely making anything, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting out of bed for that. And I know I'm not going to have a book of 100 or 200 clients, and I'm not going to have a company with 200 or 300 employees, just because we're not working with everybody. I turn more people down than I get turned down, right? Because I qualify them, I ask them questions, and then I determine that this isn't going to be a fit for us because this isn't the type of client that we work with and we can really help. And people don't like it, but I'm okay with it. I'm totally okay with how we do business and how we grow and how we, serve our clients.
I know, like, we've known each other 3+ years now. We went through all of COVID together. I know you're in a better spot now than you were 3 years ago, without question.
I'm in a better spot now than I was 9 months ago. I was telling Cindy this year, based on the things we're doing and how I'm running the company, we've had the bottom 25% of our clients leave us, and they were low profit clients that weren't moving up the stack, that weren't a huge hit on the total revenue. And it was really those kind of like small-minded business owners that left us. And at the same time, I was able to grow with the clients that we had. The profit, like their companies grew. Right. Yeah. So the companies that left us, the 25%ers, the 25% that left us, their companies were, on the verge of going out of business, very, not spending, not increasing their revenue, not increasing their budget with us. And I got rid of those, and I grew with the clients that are adding more employees, who are doing everything that we're asking, who understand the importance of this stuff. And so I'm basically growing the higher end of my business and getting rid of the bottom. And we're constantly going through that process. Like, and like what that does is the companies that were in the middle of the pack, we're looking at them going, oh, they're okay. They're now at the bottom. And we're looking at these companies like they have a target on their back. Like, hey, if they don't start doing this and they don't start doing that, we're going to end up moving away from them because we want to be working with the better clients.
And you know what? For everybody that's there, you know what that screams? That screams profitability, high operational efficiency, high operational maturity.
Yep. Yeah, but you have to commit to it. Like I remember the day that I decided that we were no longer going to try to compete with the companies that were selling at $40, $50, $60, $80 a seat. Because I'm doing the math and I'm like, I can't make any money at those prices. So, I'm not getting out of bed and I'm not going to have a company where that's the world I live in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, right. You're not going to be able to sign every client. So you got to be okay with no a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a really key point for everyone that's with us is being in a place where you're comfortable with what's running and you're okay to say. It's a very powerful thing to say no. I compare sales to dating a lot, and just think about if you say no to every potential mate, or if you say yes to everyone, it's not a very good world. I mean, sure, you'd be happy for a little while, but it's surely not going to be a long-term partner scenario.
Yeah, well, there's some benefits I can think of to dating that you don't get in this business. So you can only go so far, right?
I knew you would go there, damn it.
Right. Okay. But anyway, it's 100% true. Like I see guys get on calls in seven figure and they're trying to work through new business that comes their way. And I'm sitting there going, this is not a good fit. And you're doing everything you possibly can to try to bend over backwards to make this person a client. And that's where I wish a lot of people would get to is like, I think, and I used to be this way. When a prospect got in front of me, my whole intention was to get them to say yes to me and write me a check. Now my intention is okay, I need to ask questions to figure out if this person's the right fit for us and if we can actually, do good things for this person. It's a totally different mindset that you got to have. And, I don't see a lot of people with it. I think a lot of people still are, they get that idea that sales is getting somebody to say yes or getting the cow to buy your milk. And it's that's not it. Like your job is not to have everyone say yes. Your job is to figure out if the person in front of you is the right fit for what you're selling.
Yeah. And part of that for everybody else too, you need a sales process. You need some structure. You need a plan. You need to make sure you're doing cybersecurity risk assessments. You should be doing a paid cybersecurity risk assessment, not this free network scan stuff that we did for a long time. Like that was great for a little while, but we're in a different spot now. We're in a different position. You charge for all your assessments, right, Brian?
Yeah. So I'll say yes and no to that. If it's an extensive one, we will charge. But we have pivoted a little bit to do a more of a mini pen test that we're offering for free. And I'm just doing that simply because of the way I see the economy going.
Yeah.
And we're very specific in who we're giving that free assessment to. It's in a specific vertical to a specific size company, meaning that when we turn them into a client, they're going to be of significant value to us. So I'm talking like 10 grand or more a month.
But you're already seeing the relationship and you're qualifying ahead of time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, very important distinction there for everybody that's with us too. What is all that noise? Are you gambling?
Yeah, no. Apparently I'm popular at 155.
Apparently. Okay. So for everybody that's watching, here's my recommendation. All new prospects, unless you qualify like Brian is, like he's doing specific discovery questions, they're highly qualifying their prospects. I recommend a minimum of a $1,500 charge for up to 10 employees, and then $100 an employee up from that. For your existing clients, let's not forget, they already think you're doing most of this for them. So I would not charge. I'd still show the cost, but I discount it off and say, hey, as an existing client, we gave this to you as you present, but just do the assessment and then go present to them. And if you need help with any of that, feel free to shoot me a DM, shoot Brian a DM. We're more than happy to help you guys. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just a caveat that, and it's not black and white, right? It like what I was saying is, if we're looking at a potential client that's going to be $10,000 a month in managed recurring revenue, and they're hemming and hawing about, a $5,000 assessment, and I can sense that, I'll offer it for free or very low cost, or say, hey, it's $2,500, but we'll credit it back on the first bills type of thing, or credit it over the first 3 bills, whatever. Get creative, but don't let the cyber risk assessment is critical in us closing that deal, right? So don't let that price become a barrier to you getting, a monthly contract in place. So be smart about it. Know your prospect and understand, if you're looking at a $5,000 or $7,000 a month deal and they're kind of on the fence about the 1,500, they're not willing to say yes, like on that call, then I'll just be like, okay, you know what? I can do it for free. I got some free licenses left over from the month. I can do this for free if you can get it, if you can sign today and have us start, by,
but you're using it as a closer. And I just want to
100%. Yeah.
I just want to caveat that with Brian is a skilled sales professional at this point.
And I would do it on the back half of the month. So I'd be like, you have to sign today and we have to start by.
I can't believe I just said you're a skilled sales professional.
I can't either, dude, because I was never a skilled sales professional.
But you are now. I'm very proud of you.
Well, out of necessity, because me showing up and smiling and looking good just wasn't cutting it anymore. So, that's how I used to sell. When I was an engineer and a tech, I'd just walk in an office and smile and be like, hey, you like me? You like my prices? And yeah, I mean, that's
it was all about the price then. Now it's a different gig. So, okay. Well, we're at top of the hour here. I want to be respectful of your time. For everybody else that's here, just really quick, I want to throw Brian's podcast out here. Again, this is Brian Horning from Exact IT Solutions, Exact Cybersecurity, but him and a few of a couple of your partners in MSP land, your peers, you guys do a podcast called Security Squawk. Did I spell squawk right now? Sorry, I spelled it wrong.
Yeah, you got it right this time. Yeah. SecuritySquawk.com is the website we have. You can download some of the podcast episodes there, but you can find us on Apple, Amazon, iTunes.
It's good stuff. So I'm going to be back here doing this every week on Wednesdays at noon Central Time. So we'll put events out there in the group. Occasionally I'm going to be having lunch. You notice I'm drinking today. I'm not drinking, but I'm having some water, but maybe I'll be drinking. I don't know. I'm actually doing dry October is what I'm doing right now. Because I'm trying to cut a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, it's going to be, it's not.
Is that like a thing? Like just
it is for me. I've made it up. It's a thing for me. I need to cut I got a little bit of like that. I don't know. I'm good up here, but I'm just not like right around the bill. I'm not fat. I mean, I dropped 30 pounds in the last 3 years, but I'm trying to see an ab. That's what I'm trying to see.
I feel you, man.
I'm an avid hockey player, so he's coming into his, like, your real season is coming up right now. We're going to see the backyard rink.
It doesn't end. I'm there all the time.
Okay.
If I'm not here in my office or at home, I'm at
It's still hot by me. It's 85 degrees Fahrenheit here by me. So
it doesn't end. I had a game Sunday, game Monday. I play all the time. But that being said, the alcohol does destroy my
it definitely makes an impact. It just slows my metabolism down. So anyway, this is just real Chris and Brian. We're friends too, so it helps out. But I'll be back here every Wednesday. We're going to do various different discussions, various different topics. So today was a little bit kind of impromptu. I just text Brian yesterday. I'm like, hey, you want to come on? Let's shoot the shit about something. So this is what we came up with. I think it's very valuable. But I'm going to be focusing on sales process, cybersecurity risk assessments. We're also going to talk about marketing. We'll have some vendors as guests on. And then we're actually turning this whole thing into our podcast as well. Which is kind of where some of the content goes as well. So don't hesitate to come back. If you guys have other questions, comment on the post. We'll come back and we'll pay attention to it and answer as we go. If not, you guys have a great day. Brian, thanks so much for being with me. It's good to see you, buddy.
Thanks for letting me be your first one, Chris. Appreciate it. I'll see you all again soon, though.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later. Have a great day. Bye-bye.